Imagine this for me. It is 2007, one of the greatest years in video game history. When you're not grinding out your newly created Blood Elf and Burning Crusade, you're playing Halo 3 Ranked with your Xbox Live party. Somewhere in there, you also find time for this new game called BioShock that all of your friends are talking about. All the while, you rented the new Call of Duty from a Blockbuster that had a game store attached. Half-Life 2 Episode 2 came out, and your PC gamer friend is only talking about that and nothing else. You beg your family to get you the sequel to God of War, knowing full well that they will not let you buy that kind of M-rated game. It was an absolutely star-studded year for gaming. But there was also another game, a game that was based on the wildly successful Prince of Persia series and with many of the same people at its head. But this isn't a Prince of Persia game. It went under a new name, Assassin's Creed. It is a name that now you probably couldn't imagine the video gaming world without. The start of a franchise that would last decades and sell millions of copies across now more than 22 video games on almost every system imaginable. Welcome to Ubisoft's gem, Assassin's Creed. Greetings gamers, my name is Rednolus and welcome to the list where we tackle my giant backlog of games. More specifically, welcome to Season 2 of the list. In the last season, we played all of the Batman Arkham games as well as the Dishonored franchise, and I wanted something a little different for Season 2. One constant and long story. For that, we went with Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is a franchise with which I have played maybe a third of the games overall. I've played through Assassin's Creed 1, 2, Brotherhood, a little bit of 3, and 4. But I don't think I've 100%ed any of them, and I was definitely missing out on a lot of content. There's also a lot of holes in my understanding of the story, which means that I am missing a lot of the overarching narrative between games. I'm very excited for this franchise. Let's start off with the main story of Assassin's Creed 1. We start, as all great stories begin, with chaos and confusion. We assume control of a character we don't know the identity of, and are thrown control prompts while stuck in a highly populated area. The edges are fuzzy and the people are not fully rendered, and it seems like something's very wrong here. We don't have long before the images flash and the area changes. Voices from outside call down to us, a female and male voice calling us Desmond and trying to get us to relax. They tell us they need to bring us out of what? Flash, and we are in a large room with two people standing over us. Meet Desmond Miles, our main character. These two other people are Dr. Warren and Lucy. They claim that we used to be an assassin, but we are now a bartender. They are using a device called the Animus to find information they need through us. Desmond naturally does not want to go back into the Animus and refuses to help, but they kindly let us know that if we fail to comply, they will simply put us into a coma and do it the slow, old-fashioned way. Without much choice, we go back in. Here they explain to us what the Animus really is. The Animus is a device that lets us view something called genetic memory, a form of memory that our ancestors had that's stored in our DNA. This explains why animals know where to migrate and where to go upon being born, and gives us our soft science fiction background for this series. Somewhere in Desmond's lineage is a very important ancestor, someone named Altair. And before we get too far into it, I would like to mention that I am just a nerd from SoCal, so my pronunciation of these names are going to be terrible. I'll do the best I can, but if I don't get them 100% right, just know it's not intentional. These people want to access a specific memory, but their attempts to place us there has resulted in instability and chaos like we saw earlier. In order to reach the memory they want, we need to go through all of the memories leading up to it, allowing it to stabilize, easing into it, as Lucy says. With that, they put us into a tutorial which will allow us to stabilize our synchronization and learn the controls of the game. I will spare you the gritty details I had to go through to make a controller work on Steam. It's just difficult. The button prompts are labeled differently, camera movement needed a lot of adjustment, and much like a lot of the first Assassin's Creed game, the controls felt very clunky. If you've played any other games in this franchise, you know that as they get later and later in iterations, this gets changed a lot. There are two states Altair can be in. One where he does subtle movements, low profile, and one where he does overt movements, called high profile. In low profile, we can gently push people, blend in, look around, and move very slow. High profile movements, such as pushing people, sprinting, free running, and violent actions, it makes sense. The tutorial also goes over the basics of detection and aggression. Witnesses and people suspicious of our high-profile behavior will change the indicator in the top left, showing us if we're being looked for, hunted, or directly in combat. In order to break combat or our pursuers, we need to break line of sight, then typically find a hiding place. After a short while, our social status will change again to hidden. A lot of colors are thrown at us at this time. White means no one suspects us. Yellow means suspicious. Red means hunted. Bright and flashing means combat. Bright flashing yellow means we've broken line of sight. Blue means we're hidden but not safe. And green means we have lost our pursuers. This is the social stealth system that will carry over for most of the Assassin's Creed playthroughs. In fact, I've played all the way up through Assassin's Creed 4 currently, and it's continued all the way up until then. We also get a basic tutorial for Eagle Vision. Get used to seeing it because it'll be around a lot. While fully synchronized, we can use Eagle Vision. This lets us see what NPC statuses are. White is innocent, yellow for target, red for enemy, and blue for ally. We also get a basic understanding of the actual Assassin's Creed, 3 tenets that all assassins have to follow. Never hurt an innocent, always be discreet, and do not compromise the clan. With that, the tutorial simulation is complete, and we're ready to get put into the more stable memories. It's a dense tutorial. It's been a while since I'd played through a game with a tutorial that tries to give you everything at the beginning like this, and I feel like it's needed for this game. I haven't played Assassin's Creed 1 since the Xbox 360 initial release, so I have no memory of the controls being this clunky, but man did I hear about it being like that when I researched for the game. I completely understand the sentiment now. This game is a stepping stone for the games that we will see going forward. We exit the tutorial into the memory and immediately see Altair break the first tenet by killing an old man. One of our other 2 assassins tries to compliment us, which we immediately tell him is a skill issue. The second assassin is less interested in the fact that we broke the rules and scouts ahead. It appears that we are given a very unlikable character very early on. Altair is hot-headed and seems to have a bit of a god complex. We briefly talk about our mission with the first brother and learn that we're here to retrieve an artifact that our master wants. We traverse by free-stepping through the cave before we reach an enemy scout. We are given the choice between quiet and style, and I think you know what our guy would have chosen. We see the Ark, yes, that Ark of the Covenant, down below, where a man named Robier, an enemy of our creed, is talking with some men. Altair tells his brothers to hold up while he goes to wipe him off the planet real quick, and we head down below. Naturally, Robier sees us as we didn't have any chance to stealth. We hail them as Templars and attempt to walk up and down smash. Robier spares us so that we may carry a message to our master that we just need to give up. He then throws us through the scaffolding, locking us on the other side of the cave, and engaging our brothers. We don't have very long to move before the memory fades, fast traveling us towards Masaev. We are met by a friend who confirms the master is in his tower and expecting us. Here we can run through the streets, making our way to the top tower. This game gets a lot of criticism, and while I do see it, Assassin's Creed environments and movements are still quality. We are welcomed again by other assassins, and give the update to the master that we did not do the job he wanted us to do. Robier is alive, we have no artifact, and 2 of our friends are dead. But wait, one of our friends managed to escape. He challenges that the mission almost failed because of us, and brings forth the top of the Ark that he managed to retrieve himself. Unfortunately, Robier's forces have now arrived in front of Masaev because they want their thing back. Our punishment is put aside for now as we're sent forward to aid in the defense of the city. Templars are actively attacking the village while we are tasked with distracting them, while the other assassins help the civilians run to safety. Combat in this game is lock-based, letting our camera follow our opponent as they attack. Holding our high-profile button allows us to block incoming attacks, and we can counter with proper timing to perform either a stun or instant kill. There are a few weapons at our disposal, but they all perform basically the same. They are the sword, the knife, and the hidden blade. Once we reach the bottom, enough of the civilians have escaped that we can retreat back into the fortress, where we are summoned to do a very special task. We climb to the side of the keep and are told to stand on a specific platform. Robier yells to the master, claiming the piece of the Ark for himself, and here we get some glitches on the screen. Basically, when we see that glitch, we can press a button to move to a more cinematic camera. Without those, we stay roughly in Altair's point of view. Anyway, after the old people are done sharing threats, the master tells us to jump off. The first of many leaps of faith. Leap of Faith is a staple of the Assassin's Creed franchise, and is our express way to get off of all the high places we can climb up to. While at the bottom, it appears that one of our friends was not so versed in jumping into hay bales and he hurts his leg, meaning we will need to continue alone. Walking across some beams and climbing up the side of the tower with many conveniently placed handholds, we are now behind the Templar forces. Breaking the board in front of us drops a bunch of really large logs onto the unsuspecting would-be siegers. Fast forwarding, we are commended for our help, but are also given the blame for the deaths, as it was our weaponized incompetence and misconstruing of the creed that led to this attack. With that, the master takes out a knife and stabs us in the stomach. This rips us out of the animus, as we've been in there for some time now. Lucy seems willing to help and let us stretch, where Warren on the other hand wants us to stay in there until we reach our target memory. Unfortunately, we cannot make out what they're saying in the other room, but some poking around lets us head to the restroom and listen in through a vent in the ceiling. Warren is upset at Lucy for taking us out of the Animus and threatens her with insubordination. As we learn, there have been accidents related to these projects that has everyone on edge. Warren then tells Lucy to find a way to keep us in there longer, and the conversation ends. Here, Desmond is given leave to sleep for the night. When we awake, Warren is being the largest creep and lording over us. He then tells us that the assassins had the right idea, but did not go far enough. He then compares what we're doing now to removing corruption. He seems to be sympathizing with the Templars and says that all of society's problems can be solved somewhere in the Animus. We go back in and are placed in a memory of Altair standing before the Master, having been stabbed but not killed. It seems the Master has other plans for us. Instead of simply executing us, he has reduced our rank to that of a novice, that of basically a child. In order to regain our status and rank within the Order, we must work our way slowly up by doing tasks. The first of these is to find out who among the assassins was working with Robier using non-lethal methods. We are stripped of all of our weapons and told to go figure it out. Heading down to the market, we are given more hints as to the tools at our disposal. In order to collect information, we can eavesdrop, pickpocket, or intimidate. Eavesdropping requires us to sit on nearby benches and learn that the Weaver received a letter just before the attack, likely carrying orders to open the gate for the Templars. The pickpocket mission nearby has us following this man and taking the letter from his pocket. Those together give us the identity of someone we need to talk to. The final mission is to intimidate. The person in question is a doomsayer near the city square. Once he is done with denouncing the Master, we follow him to an isolated area and persuade him to give us more information. He then reveals that while the others carried the message, he was the one who opened the gate for the Templars, and that he does not fear death. We bring him before the Master, who kills him for the deaths of the citizens, and are given the right to carry a blade again. This awards us with both the sword and the hidden blade tools. Here, the Master elaborates by telling us more of what we'll be spending most of the game doing, going after 9 targets in various nearby cities. Our first target is in the city of Damascus. A bird is sent ahead to the city's Assassin's Bureau. We take our tools and make our way there. We are stopped for a quick combat tutorial where we can learn about combo kills and basically the ability to chain together attacks until we do a takedown. With that, we're able to leave Masaev, finish what I consider the prologue, and move on with the game. And wow, what a start to a game it actually is. We know exactly what we will be doing right away. We have 9 targets, all of which need to die for us to complete our main objective of getting our status back in the Creed. Along the way, we will have a series of missions involving all the small things like eavesdropping, interrogation, or pickpocketing. We also know exactly what kind of character Altair is. Unlikable, holier than thou, hothead, all the good stuff you need. The prologue to the game takes about an hour, and in that time I think the game does a good job of setting up what we're going to do and getting us acquainted with the game's systems. I do, however, think there are some things that need to be addressed. The density, while great for immersion, also leads to a big learning curve. The massive controls tutorial is followed immediately by a mission type tutorial, then a parkour tutorial, then a combat tutorial, making the opening seem not as organic as we are used to in more modern games. From a plot perspective, I have some questions. How the heck is Altair not dead? He was stabbed in the stomach in what the internet tells me is 1191 AD, and that knife looked really rusty. There's not even a limp on our man as we jumped off of things from this knife wound. Small gripes, I know. The game does a good enough job of leaving us interested with a lot of unanswered questions in both Altair and Desmond's stories, without feeling like we're completely clueless. Assassin's Creed 1 is not as heavy an action game as the others in the franchise. This one's slower. The gameplay and story corroborate this. Onto the road. Outside of Masaev is a large play space that is between all of the main cities. This place is called the Kingdom, a series of villages, ruins, and roads that act as checkpoints and buffers between Masaev, Damascus, Jerusalem, and Acre. While Masaev and all of the cities have a small exterior area and a sprawling urban center, the Kingdom is characterized with large open spaces. Tents of military camps line the road, rivers and mountains sprawl, making sure that we follow the roads. The space is relatively open to explore now and fully open to explore once we complete the next sequence. Each city has a loading zone on roughly one of the 4 corners of the map. Masaev in the top left, Damascus on the top right, Acre in the bottom left, and Jerusalem in the bottom right. There's also Arsuf, but we'll get to that much later. The kingdom itself is a large circle with a few short interconnected paths near the center. On horseback, it takes just a few minutes to go from any one side to the other. Inside this space, there are collectibles and targets to eliminate. Like every area of the map, there are flags to collect. There are also 30 of the game's 60 total Templars to eliminate in this large area. While visually beautiful and different compared to the more urban areas of the game, the lack of specific side quests or NPCs to talk to make this feel pretty lackluster. There are some environmental storytelling pieces here, seeing the large Crusader camp near Acre, the farming villages in the middle, or the ruined temple sites near Jerusalem make for an interesting set piece, and does give us some context for the game as a whole. But other than collecting things, there's no reward for exploring this area, and after the first time or two running through it, it begins to feel more of an annoyance than a real part of the game. When we first arrive, we have a long look at the city itself as we make our way down to the gate. It is much larger than Masyaf and has a less mountainous feel. As a city in real-world Syria, it has architecture that makes it feel unique compared to the other cities. The detail work in this game is really top-notch. The district our target is residing in is the Poor District. While we do have a directive to go to the nearby Assassin Bureau, there is no punishment for exploring beforehand. Even entering the city is left mostly up to us. Immediately outside the gates, we see a citizen getting roughed up. If we intervene by neutralizing the soldiers accosting him, he offers us assistance, and we can use a roving band of scholars to cover us as we enter the city. Alternatively, we could punch our way through with our weapons, but as the completionist, we are going to save this man. It's really hard to miss as it's right out front the main gate, and this introduces us to one of the main side jobs we'll have in this game. While in the city, the game lets us know that we have no map information, and our primary goal is to start unlocking that map and locate the local bureau. To do this, we need to find a local synchronization point. These are the fabled Ubisoft towers. Climb to the top, do a quick pan around cutscene, and now you get information on the local area. This not only lets us know where the assassins are, but also reveals any nearby quests or citizens in need of assistance. I highly recommend getting all the synchronization points that you are allowed to before doing the main objective. To get down, you simply do a leap of faith, and by God, get used to it, because we have a lot of games worth a lot of towers. There are several information quests involving our target Tamir, and as this is the director's cut version of Assassin's Creed 1, there's even more than if you got to play this on release. We have 2 pickpocket missions, one that yields a letter showing Tamir is getting ready for a large shipment, and the other giving us a map that shows roofs connecting to the area of our assassination. Informer Escort Challenge is exactly as the name suggests. Our informant wants to give us information but needs to be escorted to safety before doing so. As expected, our informant will eventually be jumped by some of the local guards, and defeating them, he will continue walking to his desired location before divulging the information. This particular time, he gives us an invitation letting us know where Tamir will be. Our eavesdropping mission lets us overhear the conversation of these 2 men as they discuss how beams above the courtyard can be accessed. Our interrogation mission lets us follow this person with the same model as every other crier in the city to an isolated location where we can beat some more details from him. We learn from him that Tamir's allegiances are not only to the masters we would expect, but he bears the mark of allegiance toward another faction. Hint, hint, hint. We also learn that whoever he serves is overseeing the production of weapons. A lot of them. Our other informant quest has us race across rooftops to reach the location and get our details. This informant tells us that he has been observing Tamir and that we can earn the friendship of some troublemakers to help us escape the assassination location if needed. Each of these missions gives us small clues as to what Tamir is doing and how we might be able to infiltrate or extricate ourselves from the scene of the assassination. Not all of them are required to do the contract. If you go to the bureau before finishing all of them, you can give your information to the man in charge and he will give you leave to kill Tamir. This will in turn lock you out of doing all of the other side missions though, unless you close and relaunch the memory sequence as I did. This is only relevant if, like me, you want to see all the pretty glowing DNA lines light up. But it is very nice that you aren't forced to do every side mission if that's not your jam. On the subject of DNA synchronizations, there will always be blue ones at the end. These are for exploration-based synchronizations such as helping all the citizens in need or doing all the sync points in a given area. With the Poor District of Damascus clear, we can head to the Bureau and start our contract for Tamir. The proprietor asks us our plan and we can give all the details of the information we've learned from our side quests. With all of this relayed, he gives us a feather for reasons that you will see very soon. It's kind of a recurring theme in the Assassin's Creed franchise. Altair is given leave to rest until he is ready to commence his assassination. Once awake, there is a new objective marker for us to follow, and doing so takes us to the position we need in order to wait for our target. We putz around in the market and wait for Tamir to arrive. He is currently berating one of his subordinates for not being able to fulfill his weapon order. Periodically, we will get the glitch prompts to move the camera, a system I'm starting to like less and less the more it occurs. I would much rather the camera move around as it needs instead of making me press a button when my screen flashes funky colors. Tamir then takes out his anger on his subordinate with death by 1,000 cuts, leaving the corpse in the pool and letting the water turn red. I guess this is because we needed a reason to narratively think Tamir is evil. But at this point, we can follow him around the market and look for our opportunity to strike. Or stand still too long and get discovered. Either way, we can eventually land a killing blow. Once we do, we are teleported into a different place, where only the Animus renders us and our target. This sort of pocket dimension is another staple of the franchise, so get used to seeing different iterations of it. All of the targets we kill will spend time with us here to share their last moments and thoughts. It is here we learn much more of what these characters think and feel. In this instance, Tamir tells us that he is not a petty death dealer or warmonger, and he confirms what our information gathering found, that he serves a master beyond himself. Our first hints that there are forces at work in this Holy Land directly opposed to the assassins. Altair and Tamir remain at odds until he finally dies. We then collect a sample of his blood with the feather as proof of contract completion, before returning to the city outside of the pocket dimension. The whole city is on high alert now, and we need to escape back to the Bureau. Running from the city guards and jumping over rooftops, we can eventually find a safe haven to become anonymous again before reporting our success. We show off our feather as proof of contract completion, and are given the final DNA piece as a reward for this sequence, with our new objective being to report back to our master. We do not get a chance to go back to Masaev ourselves, as we are again pulled out of the Animus. Lucy wants us to rest a little bit more. This time we can peek around in her emails a little bit and get more snippets about the company that's holding us here called Abstergo. It appears she messaged Warren about the veiled threats yesterday, but it has so far been left unresolved. Lucy also found his security pin outside, and Warren is his usual pomp about being called out. We can then talk to Lucy and try to get some more answers. In short, we're told that the lab in the Animus is run by Abstergo, which is ostensibly a pharmaceutical company. But the more private parts of the company we have no real information on. Lucy is sympathetic to our situation. Far more than Warren anyway. She tells us that the Animus translates things for us, making things easier to understand, but beyond that there isn't much for us to discover in this area yet. After a brief sleep, we are again woken by Dr. Warren and can return to the Animus. But not before we listen to Warren tell us that the world needs order and that the free will is what makes the world a terrible place filled with chaos. I get the feeling that we are supposed to be diametrically opposed to Warren at this point. We as consumers have definitely heard the peace through control argument in many narratives before. Warren does let slip though, that what we are doing on the Animus is finding an item of big importance to them, but we aren't told what that is yet. We enter the Animus, and again listen to the Master praise the start of our work while giving us our second task. 2 deaths this time. One in Acre and one in Jerusalem. We are then given one of our ranks back, and with it a piece of our equipment, the knife. While we make our way to our next objective, I want to have a quick chat about progression in this game. Progression seems to come in a few very limited ways. As we progress through the story, we will have Altair's previous rank steadily restored, as well as his pieces of gear. This will, over time, return him to the powerful state we saw him in during the Siege of Masaev prologue. Doing side quests will award us with a synchronization point. These are things such as high points, saving citizens, collecting flags, anything that isn't our main objective. Doing enough of these side objectives, 15 each time, will award us with an increase of our health by 1 bar. This progression is fine. Assassin's Creed 1 is a little rough in this aspect. There's no way to unlock additional items or upgrades. We will see these systems evolve a lot as the series progresses. For now, we are very bare bones in what we do to actually progress. We can get a weapon or ability, such as the ability to counter, or a single health bar increase, but that's really it. No currencies, no shops, no way to change how we look. It's simple. And I will not harp on a game for not doing something it isn't trying to do, but it bears mentioning that it is hard to feel like the character is improving as the game goes, as really nothing changes about him as we go. Short rant over, back to the story. After heading through the kingdom, we can choose between either Jerusalem or Acre. My path through the collectibles took me to the former first. Coming toward the city, we can see there are many differences between this and Damascus. Most notably, the presence of the color green and the Christian iconography. This area of the world feels much more Mediterranean than Damascus does. There is another blockade to slip past in order to enter the city. As usual, you could fight your way in, save a scholar, or parkour your way overhead. No matter which way you do it, it's the same song and dance as the last time we entered a city. We need to get our bearings with a viewpoint, locate the bureau, and start doing quests. This is standard for every single assassination for the entire game, so I'm going to skip a lot of the repetitive aspects. One thing that is noticeably different is we are in the rich district of Jerusalem, which means we have such locations as a giant golden dome, fancy churches, and guards on rooftops with sprawling marketplaces. Our target in this city is named Talal, so before we can begin the assassination, let's talk about what information we learn. From eavesdropping, we learn that Talal will stay far away during combat and use a bow. One of our informants, however, has had his face revealed and we must kill the witnesses. These 2 witnesses are soldiers wandering the marketplace, isolating, then assassinating them quietly, lets us return for our information. We are informed that Talal is a slaver that operates out of the north part of town. We can pickpocket a map from a concerned citizen telling us Talal's schedule and rough guard positions. Another of our informants has dropped a bunch of Messiah flags, so after we collect those for him, he lets us know that Talal has many followers, and in a pinch they will throw themselves at us so that Talal can escape. Another informant requires an escort beyond the city gate, wherein he will tell us where Talal will likely hide if he manages to escape us. That's all the information we need, so it's off to the bureau and start our mission. The assassin in charge of this bureau is Malik, that guy from the beginning of the game that absolutely despises us, and he makes sure to let us know. We present to him our plan, and he reluctantly gives us our feather and bids us to go and complete our task. Entering Talal's compound, he locks us in, and we can see the slaves he is holding in cages both on the walls and the floor. Talal then confronts us, maintaining that these men are not slaves, but are instead here to be redeemed. He then challenges us to step into the light, where we are promptly surrounded by his men. He then allows them to attack us, and defeating them, we can begin the pursuit. He runs along rooftops shooting, but will resume his flight if we get too close. Closing the distance on him thanks to a vigilante we helped earlier, we can use the hidden blade and are again teleported to the hidden dimension. Talal tells us that the brotherhood he serves will not fall because of his death. This is the second of these comments we have gotten from these leaders, ominous to say the least. Talal has nothing left to say to us and passes on. We stain the feather with his blood and must again escape to the bureau. Malik is less than thrilled with our methods but cannot argue with the results. With our contract complete, we can exit and make our way back to our master again. Here we get introduced to one of the coolest features in this game: fast travel. Specifically, the option to fast travel without backtracking through the kingdom. Yes please, thank you very much. Apparating in front of our master, we can report our success, and he tells us that the killing has saved countless lives, as the need for slaves is brought on by war and unrest in the area. We confide that Talal said he was saving these people. Al-Mualim tells us that Talal was likely mad, as only a madman can speak lies and believe them. We get another rank restored and access to a belt that's able to hold throwing knives, as well as the ability to tackle people. I will not quite understand why we don't have all of our physical abilities at the start of the game. Tackling somebody is not something we should unlock by progressing in rank. Either way, mission complete, and we have to go to Acre next. Acre is a very different place from the previous two cities, both in ambiance and its inhabitants. The city is firmly under the control of King Richard and his crusaders. Bodies litter the ground outside, and the remnants of a siege are apparent. Once inside the city walls, we can see that it is likewise torn and crumbling. Again, I am happy that they took the time to make the identity of each city unique, with different inhabitants and very different feels for each of the main cities. Our target here in Acre is the leader of a band of doctors, with a name that I will butcher, one Garnier de Naples. Our information gathering goes as follows. Eavesdropping on some nearby guards, we can learn that several of the rooftop guards are missing or off duty. Our informant will tell us that his patients roam freely, with the only people allowed inside guards and scholars. Intimidation lets us discover that Garnier pays his men to spread positive vibes, and the people he takes inside are neither sick nor wounded upon their arrival, but are caused pain when he works on them. When he attends to his patients, his care for the outside world lessens as he focuses on them. And from another informant, we learn that our target hides exclusively in his fortress. We also learn about nearby vantage points, and a pickpocket mission shows us that our target is connected with two other men, and they are very secretive. That's all we need to take to the bureau to get our permission to start. The bureau leader gives us our feather, and we can continue. I chose to clear out the rooftop that was short-staffed, then drop into the courtyard down below. This in turn gives us our introduction cutscene to our target, Garnier. One of his patients attempts to escape and screams and wails and protests, telling all who listen that he takes the souls of others and abuses them. We see this firsthand as the doctor orders his guards to take the patient away with both of his legs broken. Approaching him can be accomplished with parkour or scholars, and no matter the preferred method, we are close enough to kill the man as he attends to his patients, teleporting both him and us to the Shadow Realm. Garnier tells us that he can finally rest, but asks us a question. He wants to know what will become of his people. Altair tells him that they will likely be returned to their homes. Garnier counters that he took each of these people from brothels, sewers, and streets, and healed them with his strange ways. He wanted to not only repair bodies, but minds. He then reveals that his progress was slowed without the use of something called the Piece of Eden, something that we, the assassins, stole. He laments that they will again go mad without his help, and then dies. We take our blood trophy and escape the fortress. On our way to the bureau, I would like to point out a small immersion-breaking thing for me. I am all for intense chase sequences, but I find it hard to believe that every common guard and soldier in the Holy Land circa 1191 was trained as an expert parkour artist. Guards being able to keep up with us on the ground is one thing, but when I see a half dozen men flying across rooftops, Regardless, we report our victory and Garnier's intentions with this patience, and the leader chastises us for asking questions instead of simply doing our job. With Garnier dead, we are again pulled from the Animus. This time it is not because we are experiencing difficulties, but because the Animus itself is overheating. Lucy implores that we get some rest, but we can talk with her about some things. We can ask after the Animus and who built it. While Lucy oversaw the production, she's not the one who particularly built the Animus herself. She also lets us know that Warren saved her life once. It turns out, Lucy is like us, someone taken by Abstergo and forced to work. Her PhD is on something that others call pseudoscience, but Abstergo sent a hit squad on her. If not for Warren intervening, people would have killed her and people she cared about, after they used her work to complete the Animus. Because of this, she feels a debt to Warren and helps him with his work, even if she doesn't agree much with his methods or his personality. With the lovely knowledge that a pharmaceutical company has enforcers, we awake to a very disconcertedly happy Dr. Warren. We kindly inform him that we have no idea what Abstergo even does. And Warren brags that for the last 1,000 years, Abstergo has been behind every single big technological breakthrough, but refuses to take the credit. Abstergo does not in fact invent things, but more that they find things from those who came before. Alright Warren, thanks for leaving us with much more questions than answers on that front. He is really self-satisfied right now and very interested in his morning coffee. We can walk up behind him and borrow something glowing from his pocket. With that, we can return to the Animus for Mission Block 4. Back at the base, it's the usual song and dance. Amwalum doesn't give us much in the way of answers, and in fact it seems he is going out of his way to be intensely cryptic with us. But he does give us our next set of targets, 3 this time, 1 in each major city. We collect our next upgrades, throwing knives and the ability to grab ledges while falling. Both are incredibly useful. Throwing knives one-shot most enemies at range, making it the prime way to get rid of archers or enemies that you can't reasonably close the distance on. Grabbing ledges while falling, I don't have to explain how great that is. It's also one of the ways to get the last Kingdom flag collectible as far as I can tell. Upon leaving Masyaf, we are prompted that if we want to fast travel to one of the named cities. Again, amazing, as we've already physically gone to each of the locations in the game, so it's not making us do it again. With 3 targets, we can pick them in basically any order we want. I started with Acre and went after William. This mission set also opens up another third of each of the cities, as each target resides within their respective districts. For you astute gamers out there, this means that each city will have 3 targets, and in order to do all of the collecting, we'll need to go through the story doing each quest and unlocking all 9 total districts. I'll spare you the gritty details, but once you get on top of the first viewpoint and synchronize, you're open to explore the rest of the zone at will. So, our information on William. From an informant, we learned that our only escape from the Citadel if the gate is closed would be to scale the walls. Another informant sees us doing my favorite side quest ever, so I'm going to take an extra second here. For this, we have to take people and throw them into merchant stalls to destroy them. Yeah, don't mess with the assassins, or we will literally throw people at your place of business until it breaks. Our informant thanks us for breaking up the chain of commerce and tells us that William seems to connect to another man in the harbor section of the city. Not immediately useful, but hold on to that little tidbit. Another informant here has us doing my least favorite side mission, removing archers. Hints, for these missions, do not try playing along, just throw knives. Assassin's Creed 1 is not very fluid, and closing the gap is really not an option. Once we have successfully taken out all of these archers though, our informant tells us fittingly where all of William's archers are. Yet another informant has flags for us to pick up. It's interesting how some of the informants are very into us as a character, whereas this one basically thinks that we are worth less than the fungus on his toes.
Back again, Altair. Always in need of a hand to do your dirty work. This time, Al-Mualim did not order anything. It is just for my own pleasure that I ask you to find some Masyaf flags I've hidden in Richard's district. Since I am a loyal assassin unlike others, I will tell you what people are saying in Akka. It is important information. But this time, try to come back to me faster than the first time.
Either way, picking up the flags this man has dropped, we learn that William and the king have frequent disagreements, and if he is challenged by the king, he will retreat to his fortress in frustration. Beating up a propaganda crier, we can learn that understandably, William is very distracted during Richard's visit today. Pickpocketing some nearby contractors lets us learn that there is a piece they are working on that can work as a potential insertion point. That's all we need, so it's off to the bureau to let Rafik know our plan to enter, and he gives us our feathers. Heading to William's fortress, we get one of the more interesting cutscenes in the game. William is getting absolutely hammered by Richard in front of his men. His authority is challenged, his competence questioned, and he's even threatened. William then says offhandedly that there's no place for someone like Richard in the New World. Did he just, to his own men, threaten to kill the King of England? Is no one gonna say anything about that? I mean, if we could hear it, so could these civilians next to us. No? Alright then. Continuing through the fortress, we can see William as he chastises his men, just as our intel says he would. As it turns out, 2 of his men were caught being a little promiscuous on the job. They're summarily executed in front of the other officers, and everyone caught off duty is threatened with similar fates. Dropping down from our perch, we can engage and eventually defeat William. This again puts us in the pocket dimension. William asks us if we know anything about his work, and we accuse him of wanting to murder the king and take the throne for himself. William laughs us off, as we do not really understand. He claims that the city belongs to the people, and everything he was doing was to prepare them for a new world. A world he was going to help bring forth. He then laughs at us again, as we are actively causing destruction, even with our good intentions. He then passes on, we get our blood, and make our escape out of the fortress. Back at the bureau, we report our success and express our doubts and concerns that we cannot understand our enemy's plans. Rafik does little to help give us answers and basically says, "Ask Dad." Teleporting to Masaev again, we can talk to Al-Mualim. He congratulates us on our target's demise and tells us how it will help bring about peace. In his words, we are, through our actions, healing the hearts and minds of the places we strike. We then ask questions about the enemies and what they're talking about in their death rattles, saying that they seem to be going according to some sort of plan. We ask what connects them, and Al-Mualim tells us that we don't need to worry about it and we can trust him. Altair calls him out on his cryptic speaking, and Al-Mualim tries to act all high and mighty about not giving us answers, saying we will basically get them when we deserve to know. We are given a rank, a sword damage increase, and the ability to dodge. As we learn how to dodge, as if I've never played a Souls game, I want to talk about my frustrations with Al-Mualim. As a great and wise master, should he not be teaching us things as we regain our rank? He purposely did not kill us, and while we ask questions trying to understand, he basically says no, do not grow, do not learn, go forth and kill these people, thanks. If at this point you are not beginning to suspect Al-Mualim, I don't know, man. Back to Damascus we go. Our next target, the Merchant King, is as his name would suggest, in the Damascus Rich District. One of our informants gives us a map that indicates the position of the guards inside the Merchant King's estate. Further eavesdropping also tells us that wine has been delivered, and one of the men observes that the shipment was very difficult to organize. This further tells us that the Merchant King is planning on organizing a feast, and that will likely be our best opportunity to strike. After destroying some shops for another informant, he informs us that the Merchant King's quarters could provide quick access. Intimidation tells us that the Merchant King rarely leaves his quarters because he feels guilt and shame. However, he does come out and speak in front of his guests at least once per party. The rest of our missions here basically confirm what we already know. There's going to be a festival at the palace, and that will be our time to strike. With that, we can return to Rafik.
Here, my friend. Welcome, welcome. Whose life do you come to collect today?
His name is Abu Nakud.
Oh, the Merchant King of Damas. Richest man in the city. Quite exciting, quite dangerous. I envy you, Altair. Well, not the bit where you were beaten and stripped of your rank, but I envy everything else. Oh, except for the terrible things the other assassins say about you. But yes, aside from the failure and the hatred, yes, aside from those things, I envy you very much.
If you're finished, I've gathered the information required to begin my task.
Wow, he really is a snarky man. When we first arrive at the palace, the Merchant King is giving his speech, and with much spectacle, brings drink for all of his people on the fountain, turning water to wine. Man's got an ego, I'll give him that. He then praises his people for all of their work and proposes a toast to his attendants. He calls them kind, lovely, and then the speech turns far more vindictive in nature. He calls them out for words they say to him behind his back, to tell them that the war to them is nothing more than an excuse to spend coin, whereas he does the war for a cause. He continues insulting those in attendance before he admits that he has pledged himself to another cause entirely, one that would bring out a new world. Unfortunately, none of the people in the crowd will live to see it. Some begin to cough and keel over, archers attack others that it seems might live, and we make a beeline for the Merchant King. Catching up to him before he can escape, and man, for a large man, he sure can run, we strike, sending us again into the pocket dimension. We confront him about the stolen money and where it has gone. The Merchant King deflects for some time, and we assume that it's about vengeance towards the people he led. He then eventually admits that we should guess who he serves, as the clues are out there. He then calls him and Altair the same, calling us out for doubting the words of our master, and then passes on claiming that the new world will soon be upon us. Rafik, as everyone has done for us the entire game, tells us that the Merchant King was likely mad, and asks us to talk to Al-Mualim if we have doubts. Well, judging by the fact that our master has never really been one to answer questions, this is a very ask mom, ask dad kind of scenario. Assassination complete, time to fast forward to Masaev. We confirm the target's death, and the master asks us to speak our mind. Altair confirms that he is frustrated with the master who speaks only in riddles. Altair knows that these are not random targets. They're all connected together, and that makes them more important, and thus he wants to know why. In a shocking turn of events, Al-Mualim is frustrated and threatens us with death as we ask more questions. He then finally confirms something that we know has been going on if you're a fan of the franchise. These men, our targets, are Templars, the diametrically opposed faction to the Assassins. They seek to control the world through submission and subversion. Sounds oddly familiar to someone who we have had a lot of time talking to out of the Animus. Al-Mualim says that he did not want us to know, as it was more valuable to learn these ourselves. We then ask about the treasure from the beginning of the game and are again deflected. He says that much like the knowledge of who our enemies are, the treasure will reveal itself in time. We get restored another rank and bids us good luck on our other mission. This rank gives us extra throwing knives. And that's it. Neat. Back in Jerusalem we go, and it's the same song and dance that you have seen a million times. Eavesdropping, intimidating, and finding our informants basically tell us the same thing. There's an execution later this day. Our man really likes to execute people. That's going to be our best place to strike. Let's stop by the bureau and get our approval. Returning, we have another lovely conversation with our friend Malik, and he reluctantly lets us proceed. He then requests an additional aid though. It appears that one of the men about to be executed today is a fellow assassin. While we do not need to escort the man, we do need to make sure that he does not die. Infiltrating this area was rather difficult, as there are a slew of guards at each entrance and many more on the rooftops. Weaving our way through this veritable army, we can see Adin near the center, and his speech starts. In the crowd are two men who try to take this opportunity to rid the city of the warlord. It doesn't work very well, and he uses it to fuel the anger and fear of the crowd. He eventually turns and lectures his first victim, a woman he is claiming as an adulterer, where in actuality, she is said to be killed because she would not sleep with him. We drop in, land the killing blow, and are taken to the pocket realm again. Our target is very much in denial of dying, saying that he has plans that have only just begun. He explains that the Templar Brotherhood wanted this city, and he wanted the power, so it was an easy decision to make to join. He then goes on to explain that he likes having the power to determine the fates of others. The feeling of killing, the feeling of being like a god. He accuses us of wanting to do the same, and we deny it, saying that we know what happens to people who try to set themselves above others, and offer to show him. Okay, of all the targets so far, this one seems to be our first true psychopath. So once they tell us that this person's mad, I'm inclined to believe them this once. We take our blood sample and escape to the bureau, where they have heard of our success. Normally, we would expect a lecture from our friend here, but he sends us back to Masaev without another word. That finishes up this entire mission block and pulls us out of the Animus. Warren yells at us to get up before receiving a call that rather upsets him. He claims we're in a lot of trouble, and Lucy explains it's because the assassins are coming to try to get us out of the building. She continues by saying that this was expected as the assassins' fight did not in fact end in the Crusades. If you've been keeping notes, this is no big surprise, but it turns out Abstergo is a front for the Templars, and Vidic Warren is the one responsible for getting something from us that the Templars really want.
I guess the best way to explain it is, what they want is good. But the way they're going about it, it's bad. Really bad.
What are they trying to do?
Lucy is then called away by Warren, and we are sent to bed with a hint that our answers to our questions are right in front of us if we only know where to look. Once she leaves, we can take this opportunity to look through Warren's computer for more context on the Layla situation. Unfortunately, there's nothing truly special here, but the deleted items show us that someone is sending very ominous all-caps messages to our friend. With nothing else to really do, it's off to bed. The following morning, we are not welcomed by Warren as he usually does. He just yells at us to get in the Animus, and we happily oblige. Back in the Animus, we confront Al-Mualim. We confer with him about our findings, and about how these men were supposed to aid their leaders, Richard and Saladin respectively, but betrayed their leaders in order to take their cities for themselves, for this Templar order that they are a part of. Al-Mualim agrees that they were doing it so the Templars could control the Holy Land, but they cannot without the Piece of Eden, the thing currently in our master's hand. To Altair, it's just a piece of silver, but it appears to have some magical properties. Something strong enough to part the Red Sea or turn water into wine. Whoever controls this Piece of Eden can control the minds of those who behold him. We start to connect the dots. It appears that the Templars are preparing for war. We've killed people like an armorer, a doctor, a recruiter, and war leaders. It is starting to make sense now, and Al-Mualim is being surprisingly helpful for the first time ever. It then tells us there are 2 more targets of great import to us. One more in Acre, and another in Damascus. We need to deal with them before we deal with Robert, and they will be very prepared for us after the deaths of all of their comrades. We are given the gift of defense break ability and sent on our way. Defense break is weird at first because you basically press the button to move and the attack keys close to each other. I never really ended up getting used to it or really know what the ability does. New targets in hand, it's time for us to get moving. First up, our return to Acre for the Middle District, or the docks as I ended up referring to them. Before we pickpocket our first target, we can hear an old man chewing out one of the nearby soldiers. It appears our target, someone named Sibrand, is doing a very good job of messing things up in the dock area. The letter in the man's pocket tells us that there are basically no guards along the northern side though. Interrogating someone, we learn that Sibrand has required all docked vessels are to be decrewed and decargoed. Captain needs to report everything to one of the Teutonic Knights, of which Sibrand is the leader of. Sibrand has claimed nearly 100 ships for the purposes of blockading, stopping not ships from here, but ships from Richard from coming in to bring reinforcements. Further investigation tells us that Sibrand is very paranoid and knows that an assassin will come for him eventually. It appears that our man is the one who is in charge of the Templar naval blockade, and is now very concerned with us coming to kill him. Back to the Bureau to tell the Rafik that we are ready to take on Sibrand.
You are mistaken, Master Sibrand. I would never propose violence against any man, and most certainly not against you.
So you say, and yet no one here will vouch for you. What am I to make of this?
I live a simple life, my lord, as do all men of the cloth. It is not for us to call attention to ourselves.
Perhaps. Or perhaps they do not know you because you are not a man of God, but an assassin!
Never!
You wear the same robes.
If they cover themselves as we do, it is only to instill uncertainty and fear. You must not give in.
Are you calling me a coward? Challenging my authority? Are you perhaps hoping to turn my own knights against me?
Sibrand here is exhibiting the logic of a man terrified. All things the priest say vilifies him in the eyes of Sibrand, and eventually drives him to kill the poor priest. He then boards a boat and is carted down to the end of the docks. Jumping from docked ship to docked ship brings us all the way to the boat he is using as a fortress. Periodically from this boat, he will sometimes see something in the distance he deems a threat and shoot arrows at them, with one of the most raw voice lines given in this game.
Fine! None of you will lift a hand in defense of your master! I'll take care of this heathen myself!
Seriously, whoever this man's voice actor is, they did amazing. In a game that feels halfway between FMV voice acting from the old 90s games and the new age of games, this guy is a standout. Unfortunately, cool voice or not, we have to strike Sibrand down and have a nice little chat. He begs us not to kill him, and we ask him why is he so afraid. He replies it's because there's nothing waiting for him beyond death. With everything he has seen in life, there's no such thing as God or heaven. He then reveals his plan. He was going to blockade the port and prevent reinforcements from arriving for Richard until after the Templars were done freeing the Holy Land from both sides. Altair is rightfully confused how freedom can be equated to murder and death, but Sibrand falls back on the fact that they were only following orders. We take our blood and head back to the Bureau. This is one of the few times I managed to actually get a stealth assassination in the first game, and escape without being found because of how isolated Sibrand made himself. Because this is the unrefined social stealth system, it's actually quite difficult to sneak up on all of your targets if you don't know what to do. You know how it goes from here. Return to the Bureau, fast travel to Masaev, talk to our master. We inform him of Sibrand's death, and he confirms that it means our job is nearly complete. He then compares the Templars to a Hydra. Even though we have killed key figures, it will not be long before they are replaced. So we have to finish our job quickly to move on with the next phase of the plan. Before we go, Al-Mualim asks us very philosophical questions involving the Creed. Altair returns with the correct response and confirms that while the assassins also seek to better the world, they do so in order to break the illusion of the world, where the Templars would do it to control the world. We are rewarded with a knife damage increase and are sent after our final target. We take the short road to Damascus and begin information gathering on a man named Jubier. Eavesdropping on two men, we hear that one of them meets with our target to discuss work, a sort of work that demands sacrifice. Further investigation shows us that we are going to be moving within a garden, and that our target intends to burn all of the books in Damascus. Very 1984-like. If the Templars control the flow of information, there will be less resistance. We explain this to the Rafik, who gives us our last feather of the game. Slipping in through the rooftops, we can see the scholars have already begun their book burning. Jubier, our target, confirms that he thinks the texts are poison to the mind, and that the only way to see the world as it truly is to remove them from play. The man he's having this discussion with blatantly denies this, arguing that the texts are gifts of knowledge. Jubier then asks if the man is willing to do anything for the texts. Unfortunately, our man is an idiot and says yes. The order to burn all the books on the street then continues. Our job is to go throughout the city and find where these burnings are taking place, and then to eliminate Jubier. We can be slow and methodical about this, checking each target to see if Jubier, or we can simply go from burning site to burning site, defeating each until we find the right one. In addition to wardrobe differences, Jubier will not engage us in combat, he will instead run away from us. Unfortunately for him, we did all the side quests and the vigilantes held him nice and still for us to catch up. Inside the pocket dimension, he asks us why we did this, and we answer that it is important that the people are educated, able to make their own choices and draw their own conclusions. His argument is that there is an illness among the people. The only way to cure them is to control them, remove the option from them. In other words, control how they think. If you are a fan of natural history, this has come up quite a few times and you know how it's ended every single time. He then continues that it was the scrolls that inspired both the Crusaders and Saladin. It is the fault of writing that so much death is happening. He condemns us for our actions and then dies. Back at the Bureau, we report our success and confer with the Rafik about our uncertainties, but he again directs us to Masaev. Unfortunately though, with that block done, we are ripped from the Animus. Warren is in communication with somebody who calls him away, and that gives us the rest of the night to ourselves. We try to ask Lucy why the Animus ejected us, and she tries to hush us. It appears that she did it on purpose. She talks about how the Templars desperately need the item they're hunting for in the Animus, and what we do in the Animus is going to help them find it in the current timeline. Warren wakes us the next day and tells us that we are near done. The next time we go into the Animus, it will be the last time we go into the Animus. He then explains that we've learned quite a bit, maybe too much even. Desmond asks why things seem wrong in the Animus and how some things seem not to line up with what is written in history books or source material. Warren basically tells us that what is written and what had happened do not always align. History is in fact written by the victor after all. It is time now for the final mission block. Al-Mualim confirms that our final target is Robert, the leader of the sect we have been steadily taking out, as well as anyone with knowledge of the treasure. Our master confirms that Robert's lust for the Apple of Eden has driven him to cause all of this destruction, rob the people of their free will, and basically control everything. Al-Mualim tells us that he is where we very first found him in the game's prologue, Jerusalem. He bids us farewell, gives us another sword upgrade, and even more knives. One last time, we go to clear a district of a city. As we have done with all missions before, we first find as much information as possible. We can learn that the Crusaders, or rather the Templars, are attending a funeral. They requested the Jerusalem Guard be in attendance as they feel posting their own men in hostile territory will cause too much of a scene. We are going to interrupt that funeral. The Templars are very heavily armored and carry very expensive treasure. And most interestingly, an interrogation tells us that Robert seeks peace. Why else would Robert be at this funeral? But the man confirms the Templars would seek to enslave us as a way of gaining that peace. With all the information at hand, it's time to go. For one last time, we talk to Malik. He bids us safety and peace, saying that fate is a strange thing. We confirm that Robert is here, and Malik agrees that the best course of action is to go take him out. We reach a sort of reconciliation for what happened at the beginning of the game. Altair is no longer the cocky assassin he was, and has learned much, though his character arc is rather small. Malik likewise has seen Altair's attempts at helping, and is the only member of the Assassins that seems to actually listen when Altair is talking about the conspiracy for the Templars, with all the others just saying that the people he's killing are madmen. Altair then apologizes for the events of the game's prologue. Malik does not accept, not because he's angry, but because Altair has changed so much that it's almost like he's a different man, and says that if he was not so envious of Altair, he could have acted better as well. Pushing around through all of the guards, we stand and watch the speech. Robert and many of the Templars are there. At some point during the prayer, we see Robert's head turned towards us, and it appears that he definitely knows we are here. He sends a quiet order and more soldiers appear. The man giving the eulogy then reveals that they in fact do know we are here. The crowd dissipates, and the Templars attack. It appears the funeral was a trap set for Altair. This fight is much more difficult than most of the other fights in the entire game. There are a ton of armored enemies, captain tiers, and archers that attack us from range. Taking our informant's advice, we move, cutting off archer fire first, and then funneling the assailants towards us one at a time. Eventually, it will be just us and Robert. If you've been paying attention, however, you'll notice that Robert sounds strange. When we finally land the killing blow, we strip the helmet and see a woman, not Robert at all. She confirms this is no sorcery. They did this on purpose to let Robert escape. See, because Altair has done a fantastic job of killing all of his targets, Robert went to Arsul, the city currently in the battleground between Richard and Saladin, to plead for the two of them to together help eradicate the assassins, as both have had leaders die from them, and it's likely that Robert would succeed, sending both armies crashing on Masaev. While we have killed 9 victims, she is not one of ours, so Altair lets her go. We retreat to the bureau and talk to Malik. We tell him of our predicament and how we wish to go to Arsuf to stop Robert. Malik says that we should confer with Willem first, but there's not enough time to do both. Altair then goes to stop Robert, while Malik will learn what he can from the people of Jerusalem in order to get answers. The ride to Arsuf takes us near Acre, and it's the only time that we are required to go through the kingdom after the first time visiting each city. After riding there, we can see that this place is in complete and utter chaos. Armies clash in the background, and walls are put up by the Animus. Walls that bar us entry unless we defeat waves and waves of opponents. First we fight through Saracen forces, then Crusaders, until eventually we reach the forces of King Richard himself. We come to him with diplomacy first, saying that we do not want his blood. We explain to him the thoughts of Robert, and Richard does not believe this. We then admit to the deaths of his 3 lieutenants, explaining that while we did so, each of them in part had a plot to kill Richard and take control for themselves. Richard then confronts Robert about this, which of course he denies. We continue our appeal, and Richard does not seem to be fully on Robert's side. When Robert tries to leave, Richard stops him. Well, I'll let you listen to this burn.
What do you intend? Surely you do not believe him?
It is a difficult decision, one I cannot make alone. I must leave it in the hands of one wiser than I.
Thank you.
No, Robert, not you.
Then who?
The Lord.
Richard then lets us take up arms against his men, and we perform trial by combat. Once we defeat the final wave of enemies, Robert himself joins the fight. He is strong, and after just fighting a wave of difficult enemies, it comes down to one hit between us both. We throw him to the ground and land the killing blow. Here in the pocket dimension, we confront Robert. He laughs, saying he knows nothing of schemes and saying someone has betrayed us. He continues that Willem sent us to kill exactly 9 men. Oddly enough, there were 10 people when the artifact was found. 10 people knew the secret, and the only person who seems to know about this artifact now is Willem himself. It appears our master has pulled a fast one on us, sending us to get the piece of Eden, then having us clean house of all the important people that also knew his secrets. It was always odd how he knew exactly who needed to be killed and where they were. While Willem is not a Templar himself, he does share a lot of their philosophy. The best way to exert power and peace is through absolute control. Control he wanted for himself, and had Altair do the dirty laundry. Robert says that with him dead, there is only Altair left to stop Willem. Richard bids us well, asks us that before we go, why did we do what we did in order to find Robert? He assumes it has to be vengeance, and we correct him. We say justice, so that there might be peace. Richard calls this mad, much like Saladin, and then we tell Richard that both factions wish this war over, even if it may not seem so, sort of hinting that they should do some peace negotiations. Richard naturally scoffs at this. Altair says that we as humans are what we choose to be. Richard says that perhaps peace can happen after this battle after all. We warn him about the dangers of control, as there are a lot of people that are currently plotting against Richard right now. He bids us farewell, and we are ripped once more from the Animus. Warren plays audio from downstairs in the building. Gunfire explodes through the speakers, as it appears the assassins are now here trying to break Desmond out. The Templars, though, confirm the assassins will be quelled at some point. He then threatens us, telling us that the assassins have steadily been eradicated over the last few years. Warren tells us that they have been hunted in their enclaves and communes throughout the world, and bids us to rest and leaves, promising us to finish tomorrow. We talk to Lucy after Warren leaves, who then tells us that she thinks Desmond's parents escaped, one of our few hints of the backstory to Mr. Miles. Desmond is very concerned with the death of the assassins, and Lucy asks us to have a little faith, showing us a sign of her hand with the left ring finger closed, a sign of the assassins, and that she's been working with us the whole time. We sleep and prepare for the final memory. Warren wakes us up, so chipper and excited for us to finish, and bids us to get started as soon as possible. It appears the assassin incursion did not go the way that we wanted it to. We enter the Animus with Altair returning to Masyaf, and it looks very strange. First of all, we don't teleport directly to Willem, we teleport near the front. The people are wide-eyed, monotone, and talk about something called the Path, something that the Master showed them. The very air around Masyaf seems wrong. The once lively streets are now basically deserted. Smoke and ash fill the air. The path upward is deserted, and the few that are there have the same lifeless monotone as the man who talked to us down below. When we get near the top, assassin guards wait for us. They don't attack right away, but once we are surrounded, they strike. With no choice, we fight our own brethren. A second wave of assassins follows the first, and we fight until they all fall. Malik then calls to us with his own men, showing us that they are here to help. Assassins that are not corrupted by whatever is happening in the city. Malik explains that Robert in fact kept a journal, and it explained Altair's theories and thoughts. Willem plans to take the Holy Land for himself, using the assassins as his arms. Malik offers to help, and Altair has them work as a distraction, while we go in after the Master. In front of the Citadel are dozens of innocents. We push through them, not killing them, as it's not their fault they're listening to Al-Mualim with a holy artifact. We push through to the back door of the Assassin Citadel, where Al-Mualim awaits us. He stops us, literally locking us in place with the Piece of Eden. Mualim considers what to do with us. He cannot let us go, as we know his plan and that would be too dangerous for him. He continues to explain that he has found some sort of divine truth. He cannot let us live, and so summons the form of all 8 of our previous targets throughout the game in order to attack us. They are much weaker than the ones we fought previously, and while the wounds they inflict on us are still painful, each of them takes only a single hit before dissipating. After this, we are again locked in place. Al-Mualim gloats at his plan, saying that he is not afraid of Altair. How could he be afraid while he is holding all this power? He then summons copies of himself to fight us. Defeating the real Al-Mualim, however, sees us getting locked up once again. Mualim tells us that he has not been very good at sharing and explains that as long as men have free will, there will be no such thing as peace. He, however, cannot control us as he does the others. He admits that he did in fact try to control us once, when he first held the Piece of Eden out to us way back at the beginning of the game, but somehow Altair can see through the illusions the Piece of Eden can produce, because that's all they are, illusions. They cannot create reality, but to observers, they really don't know the difference. He then compares what he is doing to all of the other armies tromping through the Holy Land. And with our master unable to control Altair, that leaves us no choice but one final fight. After doing enough damage, the master retreats, using his illusions to make himself disappear. But because Altair is different than the others, he can see through these and find Al-Mualim and break the magic. Landing a final blow on Al-Mualim sends us to the Pocket Dimension a final time. He is appalled as he was supposed to be so much stronger than us. Our former master hopes that we claim the Piece of Eden for ourselves, but we vow to destroy it. But before we can, it activates. It shows Altair a map of the entire world, with some points highlighted in bright blips of color. I think some part of him understands that there is power in what we view right in front of us. Bleeding through the Animus, we hear Warren's voice. Warren saying that they've got it, and now we know what it is that he was looking for. They wanted this map with these locations. It appears that each of these blips are other pieces of Eden, several of which are now on landmasses that no longer exist. They go back and forth a little bit, claiming that now that they have the map, Desmond is of no further use to us, but Lucy advocates for our life. She argues that some of these locations may require an assassin in order to get to. Warren, with what he needs, leaves. Desmond can now see with eagle vision. It appears that he has developed some of the abilities that Altair has had in the Animus. This shines light all over the room, showing messages, ciphers, and stuff on the floor and walls. Entering our bedroom, we see that there is even more written on the wall. Tons of it, in many languages, with many symbols. With that, Desmond asks the question I've been asking the entire game.
What does it mean, I wonder?
And the credits roll. Okay, let's unpack this a little bit. The story of Assassin's Creed is one that if you were a gamer growing up anywhere around the mid-2000s era, you knew the gist of. There's a group of assassins, they fight a group of Templars. There's some sci-fi stuff in there too, but that's basically all that we know. On a surface level, these people are correct. But let's talk about what the first game is trying to do. Assassin's Creed 1 is not a great story by any means. I know, get out your pitchforks and torches for the people that are purists and say that the first game is the best game, but it's just not a great story. It's a good one that sets up great stories later. See, told you, you don't have to get the pitchforks. It's hard for me to give an unbiased look at this story. I already knew Abstergo were the Templars. I already knew Al-Mualim was a traitor of sorts, but the details were lost in my memory. As with most things I played when I was younger, I knew the gist of it, but I didn't much care about the minutiae. Tonally, I will say, I think the story is on point. We start in the eye of a hotshot assassin, as well as the eyes of a confused and imprisoned man. We, as the player, know that these characters will have to do some sort of growth in the story. With Altair, it's a philosophical battle he has with himself and with the Creed, learning the true meaning of it. With Desmond, it'll be a mystery where he pieces together details from his captors and potentially learn how to escape. These are the two main goals of the story, and neither of them really happen in their entirety in the first game. Altair does get taken down from his place of power, both figuratively by being stripped of his rank, and also literally as we lose all of his abilities and upgrades in a gameplay sense. We as the player level up and grow with Altair. The learning he does in the background mirrors us, the player, learning about the story that will frame the whole franchise. This creates investment not only in Altair, but also with figuring out the lore of the universe in a natural way. I will say, Altair's arc is a little weak for me. He doesn't spend a whole lot of time actually conversing with characters other than Al-Mualim, and Al-Mualim, quite frankly, has been unhelpful for the entirety of the first half of the game. I know Altair is supposed to have gone through this transformation, but I don't really see that transformation happen as much as I wish I did. There's really only 4 characters in the game, not including people outside the Animus. There's Robert, there's Al-Mualim, there's Altair, and there's Malik. Everyone else is pretty one note. With such a limited number of characters, it's no surprise that we don't get as much depth or development as we want. Desmond is our audience surrogate for the game. While we, the gamer, are not literally strapped to a magic table that lets us play through the lives of our ancestors, which also sounds sick, by the way, we are learning of Altair and Abstergo through Desmond. We learn quickly that there are 2 bad guys. For Altair, it is Robert and the people he leads. A few missions in, we learn that their order is the Templars. Every mission gave us little breadcrumbs that the targets were connected, and remember a while ago when I said that William was working with another person at the docks? That person was Sibrand. And you know what? The game never tells you that. You as the player can understand that if you do all the side missions. The first Assassin's Creed does what a lot of modern games don't. It lets you discover things. It lets you be smart. The second bad guy is Abstergo Industries. And much like us learning through Altair, we can intuit that Abstergo is the Templars before Warren tells us so. So no, I will not say the story of Assassin's Creed is great. In the same way, a pilot episode isn't always the best episode of a show. It's there to set the scene, get people interested, and to be good enough to set up for the great things. But with the amount of world building it does and the amount it lets the player interpret, it becomes very good. Assassin's Creed 1 works a lot better in the context of later games as well, which I'll not be spoiling here. This game does work in letting us get the player invested, especially because there are some heavy-hitting games coming up in this franchise. Okay, pitchforks down, let's talk about some more things. Assassins and Templars. Get used to hearing these 2 names in each of the videos coming up. In short, the Assassins believe in free will. While they themselves kill, it is to preserve the peace and growth of humanity, to prevent people from getting into control. They're very libertarian in nature, but they're more interventionist because they like to keep people like the Templars from direct control of the populace. On the opposite side of this spectrum, we have the Templars, representing more authoritarianism, direct government control of all people, individual choice not taken into account. Very big brother is watching you. I know there's a whole lot of people that will probably get to this part of the video and turn right off. There's no place for politics in video games. This is a game about assassins, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, it's a game about assassins, but I feel the Assassin's Creed series is inseparable from political ideology, as it's the core of the game's dialogue and the driving factor for most of the conflict. I will preface our discussion of politics in future titles that discussion and discourse is different from saying that your political ideology is bad or wrong, and it is also okay to take part or like a system while still critiquing aspects of it. Okay, enough politics for now, let's talk about Al-Mualim. Al-Mualim is the shadow antagonist of the first game, and a lot of the discussion I had with friends about him was people calling him a Templar. Okay, while he worked with the Templars, he himself was not one technically. He was not indoctrinated into the Order, he does not lead the Order. The Templars worked with him to get the Piece of Eden, and he betrayed them, sending Altair to go get the artifact once he helped them find it. But Red, why didn't he go get it himself? He's a 56-year-old man in 1191. He's not doing too hot. He looks rough for 56. I doubt he could overpower 9 Templars. At least 3 or 4 of them are trained soldiers. See, Al-Mualim is the leader of an order of people whose entire livelihood is subterfuge, sabotage, and murder. Might as well use them. Okay, now hear me out. Even though he worked with Templars, it does not mean that he worked for Templars. I will bet money that this will get explained in later games, but for now, here is my theory. Al-Mualim worked with the Templars again to obtain the apple, fully knowing that he was going to steal it from them and use it to do an Uno reverse card and then stab them all in the back. His intentions at the time were pretty good. He, being an assassin, still wants to save the Holy Land from massive conflicts brewing with the Crusades and the Templars' attempt at global domination. He deduced the best way to do this was to go after the apple, then use Altair, an assassin he has trained since a child, in his arms, while he figured out how to operate such a powerful artifact. He was corrupted by the power of the apple, and in that became Templar-like in his want of control. After all, he has worked with them, so he does know what they believe in. Al-Mualim is actually an interesting character if written pretty poorly. Or maybe not written poorly, but I'll say presented poorly. I know I went on for a bit about how Altair lived through getting stabbed in the intestines, but it's made clear that that never really occurred. Al-Mualim used the apple to project the image that Altair was stabbed to create the illusion of rebirth and second chance. That's why Altair is so confused when he wakes up in Masyaf and isn't wounded. Al-Mualim planned on using Altair all along, and the excuse of his poor performance fit into his plan so nicely he ran with it. It's something that's right there when you look back and think on it, but on a first playthrough, you glance right over it and assume that it's just the plot needing to be moved forward. In this way, the game is abusing our meta sense. This is a perfect segue to talk about another facet of Assassin's Creed, the supernatural elements. This is something someone who's only played a handful of the Assassin's Creed games, remembered, but didn't remember what was really the point. I remembered there being an animus and something about genetic memory, which I suppose could be considered pseudo-supernatural. Again, writing this now, I have a theory in the back of my mind that the artifacts are somehow connected to how the animus works, but for now that's just speculation. There is no doubt the apple itself could be considered supernatural. Not necessarily magic, but more than the understanding of our characters. And as Thor tells us, science and magic are one and the same for people who don't know the difference. I feel as if this aspect somehow gets forgotten when discussing Assassin's Creed at large. The real world and supernatural aspects are part of the core game identity. Yes, it's about assassins and Templars, but the mystery of the artifacts and hints at people who came before should be noted as one of the core facets. I am excited to learn more about these. Playing the games as young Red, I wanted to play the games because they were flashy and I could be an assassin. There's also a part that I've heard where Assassin's Creed is really good if you're into virtual tourism. You might be interested in something like Renaissance Italy, and so play Assassin's Creed 2 for the purpose of experiencing Renaissance Italy. I can't say I remember too much of the plot, but playing through them now with basically a fresh set of eyes shows me that there are layers upon layers of narrative to dive into here, partly because of the real world and the supernatural aspects. Again, when doing research for this game, I saw a lot of people critique these parts, and to some extent, I think that there's a lot of fair criticism here. If you want a pseudo-historic assassin simulator, a piece of Eden crediting with parting the Red Sea and controlling the minds of others would be a letdown if you wanted a more realistic approach. My argument, if you're here for the game, stay for the game. Let's talk about my last story discussion thoughts, I promise. One of the things I did not notice until about halfway through writing this is that there's no real cinematic cutscenes. While I don't think every game needs them, and the in-engine cutscenes we got are good, there's something I did very much not like about the system. When you see a glitch flash across your screen, you can press a button to activate the cutscene, or at least change where the camera's looking at. I would much rather just have the game move the camera to where it wants me to look without me having to press a button, especially with how often they show up. I know Altair can move around in cutscenes, but the movement is minimal, and it isn't worth losing the cinematic camera. Another thing I think the story does poorly is its ending. The ending inside the Animus is great. Going from fighting Robert to going back to Masyaf and having to fight Al-Mualim cinematically is awesome. Once we leave the Animus though, Desmond is basically told he will be around as long as you are useful, and Desmond has learned how to use eagle vision. We can inspect the room and use it inside the bedroom to see all kinds of crazy things on the walls, and funnily enough, we've already received flashes to this while Desmond was waking up. Once we've stared at this for a while, Desmond questions what he's looking at, and then the game just ends. It felt very anticlimactic. We had a very cinematic and impactful ending with Altair, but with Desmond, I feel like they just didn't know what to do with him. This is a trope that I think follows with a lot of early games in this era, where they had to make a game that was self-contained enough where if it didn't do well, they could just end it, but open-ended enough that if they could make a sequel, they would. That's why I feel like they didn't really flesh out Desmond's character. We don't know anything about his family, we know very little about his past, we're just kind of left to wonder. It's like the writers said, if we get a sequel, we'll deal with it next time. It's not game ruining by any means, but it definitely felt out of place compared to the rest of the game. Alright, that's enough about the story. In all, I thought the story was fine. On to side objectives and collectibles, because oh, does this game have a ton of them. My playthrough of Assassin's Creed 1 took a little under 28 hours. Of that time, 20 hours of it was spent doing collectibles or side content. Let's start with side content. There are no true side quests in the game, no bounties or extra contracts from Rafiqs that we have to do. All we have is civilians that need saving, and then the bonus objectives for getting information. And there's a lot of those. As for saving civilians, there's roughly 84 of those by my count. That's a lot of time to defeat enemies, and most of the time simply attacking the group that's accosting us will draw even more soldiers. In some cases, it would take me upwards of 5 minutes for guards to stop attacking before I could complete the side mission. In addition to that, there are viewpoints, something that I know is a fan favorite to people of the Assassin's Creed franchise. To the point where, myself included, a lot of people will call these high towers in other video games Ubisoft towers. It all started here, people. There are 91 viewpoints in the first game, meaning that there are 91 tall buildings for us to climb up and spin around. These were more fun than the civilian missions because the reward was always a pretty view with a cool leap of faith. If the leap of faith worked and didn't kill us on impact, that is. In addition to both of these, there are flags. And man, Altair must have a killer flag collection. Each area of the game has a certain number to collect, starting off small. Masaev has 20 assassin's flags spread throughout the city. 18 of them are obtainable as soon as we are in control of free roaming, and 2 require a bit of story progression. So it's not too bad in the first area. The kingdom, though, is a wide open area in between the cities and has 100 flags, only one of which requires an upgrade later in the story, and that's the one to grab ledges. I can forgive the 100 flags here. The kingdom is huge and there's a lot of little interesting areas to poke around and explore, and it seems like the whole purpose of the area was to put a collectible. But no, see, Altair really likes flags. There are 100 Saracen flags in Damascus, 100 Jerusalem flags in Jerusalem, 33 Hospitalier flags, 34 Templar flags, and 33 Teutonic Knight flags spread throughout the districts in Acre. For those of you that are not math whizzes, that brings the grand total of flags to a whopping 420. But wait, there's more! Throughout the Holy Land, there are 60 Templars protecting chests or different areas. Each of those needs to be killed, turning them into a collectible as well. This brings the whopping total of collectibles to 480. Now, if you want to count collectibles, which I do, that means 571 collectibles. And that doesn't include saving the citizens, which would bring us to 655 things to do. Now, what do we get for doing them? Not much. Viewpoints fill in the map, which is a plus and makes our lives easier. Saving the civilians unlocks either scholars for hiding places or vigilantes to run up and grab people for us. Useful for sure. What do we get for flags and Templars? Nothing. Every 15 side objectives gets us a health bar. No cosmetics, no upgrades, no acknowledgement, no flags showing up in a trophy room in Masaev, no robes to represent the cities or areas we finished collecting in. In the wise words of Willy Wonka,
you get nothing! You lose! Good day, sir!
What's worse is I don't know why. I like to collect things. I collected hundreds of Green Riddler trophies in the last season. But for those games, it gave me a reason to do it. They gave experience for upgrades, audio logs, concept art, challenge maps, achievements. They rewarded you for participating in the game. They showered you with praise for doing it. In this game, if I was playing on Xbox, I would have gotten an achievement. For some people, myself included, that would usually be enough, but something, anything, would also have been a nice addition, especially because I'm playing this on Steam, which doesn't have achievements. That's my rant on collectibles. They were not difficult in this game, they just took forever, and I feel as if I didn't get anything for doing them. I know there will be a billion things to collect in this series. My hope is that they at least give me something. A change of robe color, maybe. I'm not that hard to please. All right, let's wrap up the first game, shall we? And we have made it to the end of another game. I'm not gonna lie, this game was both better and worse than my memory, but I'm glad I replayed it. The ending has left a sour taste in my mouth, so much that I wanted to blast through the script to get to the second game. In some way, I think this means that Ubisoft succeeded. I want to play more Assassin's Creed. They made me want answers, and I'm gonna find them. I like the story. I know it's not perfect, it was simple. Altair is a fun character to follow, and I found myself listening carefully to all the people he talked to and the clues he found. Outside of the Animus, I'm also intrigued by what's going on. We got a quick explanation on the Animus, but I anticipate getting even more of that in the other games. As for collectibles, I would be happy to never see another flag in my life. I've had my rant here though, so I'm just glad it's over. In all, I really enjoyed my time with the game. It's a wonderful game for 2007, a year that I will probably always argue might be the best year in gaming history, or at least for my generation of gamers. Time for the tier list, bring it on out. I have changed my mind on this game 3 times now, and I know someone somewhere is always going to be mad at me, but my placement for Assassin's Creed 1 is a B. A B is still a pretty high rating. The game is not bad by any means. It's immersive, the combat is fun if overly simplistic, and the story is decent. My problem with it is I feel as if it's a pilot episode of an anime. It's meant to test the waters, see how people feel, maybe make a few adjustments before it gets too far. It is a fun game, and taken in a vacuum in 2007, not knowing what would come, I could see this moving up to an A. I know from my Reddit hauls that there are purists out there that say this is the best game in the franchise, and after this it always got worse. To those people I say, cool. Maybe for you it is, but I have a feeling that there are games coming up that will be a lot higher on my list than this first one. I cannot wait to play the others. Next episode will be Assassin's Creed 2, to no one's great surprise. As usual, thanks everyone so much for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, please press the buttons you think it deserves and share it with a friend. This has been Red Nolis. I appreciate your time greatly. Have a great day.